But you won't know him. It's a very terrible comedian on German TV, but not directly, like,
Yeah,
you know.
distant.
Are you related to somebody famous?
No, not that we know of. No, my great-grandfather was murdered, though.
By who?
The Cossacks in Russia, they had these pogroms, these things where they would riots and kill Jews, and they...
So, bist du bereit?
Ja.
Gut,
Es kann losgehen.
Okay, so let's start. Okay.
Okay.
Quiet, please.
Like I said yesterday, like I want to, start with a more general approach to everything.
Mm-hmm.
This is TV and blah blah blah. So the first thing I would like to know, what I already asked you yesterday, how would you explain the internet to somebody who's not familiar with it? How does it work? Not technically, but maybe from structure or from the space idea of space behind it.
Well, it would actually be technically accurate to call the internet a sea of note cards of different colors, where email would be little blue cards maybe, and websites would be little red cards, and FTP sites would be little green cards. And with your computer, you basically ask it to find a card. If I want to find all my email, then it looks at all the blue cards and finds the ones that are sent to you. If I want to find a website, it'll grab that card and look at that. So it's really just a series of cards that are out there. And there's a number of ways to look at those cards. So you can either just look at that one card, or you can take a card and then write on it and then put it back out there. Or you can even take a card and say, okay, let's all go to that card and write on it at the same time, and that would be a chat room. So it's not really an architecture, it's not really a place as much as a series of places, of little addresses out there, each one containing words or pictures or sounds or videotapes, and you using your computer to find one and then play with it.
So everything you've mentioned right now, it's also already based on communication. I think that's a very important issue within the, traveling through the internet. Communication becomes very important. How would you describe the structure of net communication? I mean, there are many things like emails, newsgroups, virtual communities, chat, mailing lists, private homepages. Just to give some examples, could you say, say something about each of these little slots or cards, as you just said, maybe starting with email?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Most people don't think of media as a form of communication. Most of us think of media, say, as television and radio, and you can go to the communication department of a university and they'll tell you they're teaching you about communication, but they're not. They're teaching you about propaganda. The study of mass communication is the study of how to send messages down to the masses, whether you're a government or a corporation talking to your constituency or your customer base, you send stuff down. The real difference with the internet is that it's communication in the real sense of the word, where people speak to one another. So email is not just like your mailbox in front of your house where you get maybe one or two letters from friends, but mostly just junk from companies trying to sell you things, or bills from companies asking you for money. It's much more of a two-way thing. So you think of email just as much as a way to speak to other people or to send them what you have, as a way for them to talk to you. It's really the closest thing that people who haven't been online could think of would be a telephone with an answering machine. That really email is not something that goes to your computer right away and then rings a bell and you have to go look at it. But you turn on your computer, like turning on an answering machine, and see who's left note cards there for you to look at. And then you can write something on them and send them right back to the person. So it's just non-physical notes, really.
So that's like a very, like you said, a very direct form of communication, like one-to-one. But when you have, for example, virtual communities, that's something very new and very different. You said email can be compared to telephone in a way, but virtual communities is something quite different. How would you explain that, how this works, or what the actual meaning or Bedeutung, fuck, what's that word in English?
The essence?
Yeah.
Well, there are two kinds of virtual community. There's chat rooms, and then there's what's called asynchronous communities, meaning not synchronized, not at the same time. So some virtual communities are really just like bulletin boards, where people write a note, put it up, tack it up on the bulletin board, other people see that note, and then either send you an email because they've seen your note, or put another note right after it, and then someone looks at that one and sends something after it. So when you go to the virtual community, when you go to the bulletin board, you see all the things that people posted in order, and it's like a conversation. And if, let's say, there's someone named Doris, and I see that Doris always posts in a certain way, she always says a certain thing, I then get a sense of who Doris is, what kind of person she is, because whenever we talk about children, she always says, oh, I hate them, they're so annoying, and this child did this, and I think, oh, I get a sense Doris doesn't like children. And then there'll be Seymour, and Seymour will always talk about his son. Whenever people talk about it, he talks about his son, and his son's in second grade, and his son learned to write, and his son just built a model airplane. You go, oh, Seymour, I got a sense of him, he lives for his children and his son. Or people might talk about a certain idea. There might be an area of a bulletin board where they talk about censorship. And then different people will argue, oh, censorship is important because people might put out bad information, and other people, oh no, everything has to be free. And you start to get a sense of who is who. And once you're communicating with people regularly, and you have an idea of what their personalities are, what their ideas are, it's very much like a community. You know, it's a group of people conversing, sometimes more honestly than they would in real life in a pub or in a classroom, about issues that matter to them, or they wouldn't bother speaking.
Why do you think it's more honest than when you're in the pub? I mean, there comes in the aspect of physicalness that you're not...
Well, most people say that people get honest online or dishonest online because they're anonymous, because no one knows who they are. I would argue that people are basically, intrinsically honest, that we want to be honest. We want to say how we really feel, but that the culture we live in has become so repressed that we're scared to be honest with each other. Or people will think, oh, he's stupid, or his ideas are stupid. So right now, the internet is one of the only places where people feel comfortable saying what they really believe because they don't think that others will attack them in the same way. And sometimes you get attacked online, but you don't feel like they're attacking you the same way. And sometimes you'll fight for an idea much more online than you will in real life. You know, in real life, certainly in the United States right now, people are very afraid to disagree with each other. If you say, oh, did you see this movie? And they go, oh, yeah, I saw it. What did you think? And the other one will go, well, I don't know. What did you think? Oh, I liked it. Oh, yeah, me too. I liked it too. And they both say they liked it. And it might be actually the case that both of them didn't like it, but they want to agree really quickly. And online, if someone says, oh, I just saw the new Tom Hanks movie, isn't that great? And if someone didn't like it, they'll just say right away, no, that movie sucked, and it was stupid for this reason, and that reason, and this reason. So you end up with much more honest communication, even about very, very simple things.
So it's right to say that communicating in a less physical way makes people more honest. Is that what you would say?
I would say it's not, people are not more honest because it's less physical, but people are more honest because the rules of that social situation haven't been so firmly established, you know, and that there's nothing at stake because of that. You know, people are desperate for places to go where they can be honest and where they can enjoy each other in a non-commodified way. You know, where they can enjoy each other without someone selling something to them, or without it affecting their job or their wife or this or that. So people will find places to be honest with each other, places to be open, places to be vulnerable. If they hadn't found online, they would have found something else. But what I'm starting to see now is people who've been online and who've experienced the joy of being honest, of being open, of communicating as equals with others, when they go into real life, they're much less willing to repress who they are. So they go to work after they've been honest online, and they want to be honest with their coworkers. They want to be honest with their boss. They want to be honest with their wives. And in that sense, the internet is really just remedial help. The internet is not the end in itself. It's not that the internet will be the place where we are more honest. It's that the internet trains us to be more honest. The internet trains us to be open. It teaches us how to communicate. Most people don't communicate. They listen to their boss, they work all day, they come home, and then they turn on the TV and they listen to that. And then maybe they get in bed and maybe they share a couple of honest things with their wife, but maybe they don't even do that. They don't say, oh, I'd like it if you stroked me on this side rather than that one. They don't even say that. So now if people are slowly trained to say what they feel, it could change the way we relate to each other in real life.
That's very interesting. I mean, that you say that, the internet trains you to be more honest, and you take it on to your daily life beyond the screen, or in front of the screen. That's interesting. But you just mentioned that you said that there are not so many rules in the net, but I have the impression that there are quite a lot of rules which you have to follow. I mean, they're not like laws. When you disobey, you get punished or something, but there are certain rules of communication, of the language, of the behavior towards other people that you don't know. Could you say something about that?
Yeah. There are definitely rules that have evolved online for how people should relate to each other. But these rules evolved naturally and spontaneously out of people's need to be able to communicate. In other words, in good online communities, or successful ones, usually the idea of tolerance is very important. So people really learn to tolerate divergent points of view. You don't want to eliminate someone. You want everyone to be able to be included so that a communist can talk with a fascist, can talk with a capitalist, and they can still converse and exchange ideas without censoring anybody. I mean, there might be rules where, you don't send instant messages to someone of a highly sexual nature if they don't want that to be done, or you don't, try to hack somebody's account and speak as if you were them. There's some rules like that, which aren't hard and fast rules, but are just general, polite social conduct that helps everyone be able to cooperate with one another. But the rules that have come up online are natural rules that generally promote discourse. They promote social intercourse. The rules that have plagued us in other areas of culture are rules that may have been established by priests who want people not to talk about sex because then they're going to find out that sex is not shameful, or by corporations that don't want people talking about, how much money they make and what job they have because then they'll want more. I mean, why is it considered bad form to tell someone how much money you make, to compare salaries? Is there a real reason? Well, yeah, the only one who would have that reason would be the bosses, who don't want people to compare because then they're going to ask for more money. It's not a natural set of rules that came up organically as a way to help people enjoy one another. They're rules that were established by governments, by the masters of social control, really, who want to keep people in a state of ignorance and a state of fear.
But if you describe, communication in the internet as something that is very comparably free, you say a communist can talk to a fascist as an example. I imagine that there comes a lot of tension. There's a lot of how can you deal with this tension? Because surely when two strong opinions hit each other, there's something something happens. So how?
Yeah. When two strong opinions hit each other online, there might be a lot of tension, but it can be beautiful tension. It could be, real and glorious to watch a brilliant libertarian go up against a brilliant Marxist and argue their points of view. It's so much more beautiful to watch it happen online, consciously and well articulated, than in the trenches of Flanders Fields, where people getting bloody. I mean, there's blood of a sort. There's virtual blood. There's, the intellectual battle scars when you watch these ideologies go against each other, but it's real. The thing that happens sometimes, though, is when you end up in a prolonged argument with someone, even over years, where you find them in different forums, always the same two characters, you can start to see people get so emotionally involved that they're no longer arguing ideas, but they're arguing out of passion, emotionality, or psychology. Like, I know some people who, at various points, got very upset with things I've said or things I've written in my book. One book I wrote was about how cyberspace is very spiritual. It's a very spiritual thing, and it's helping us all develop into much more spiritual beings. And this person's very Marxist and hates that idea and thinks that that's a way that corporations will come and take over the whole world if people believe these things. And he got so upset that I started to see my name come up in every one of his articles, and every time he'd go online, he'd say these things about me that weren't even true anymore. He would just say, oh, I bet Doug Rushkoff would say this. I bet Doug Rushkoff would say that. So he had constructed a phantom character of me that was then in all of his work. And I was thinking, wow, now that's gotten a little weird. That's gotten scary. Or for me, if I wrote a novel that a lot of people like, but a lot of people don't. And I'll see people online saying, oh, Doug Rushkoff's novel sucks. And here's why, and he's stupid, and he makes too much money, and he's too old, and you look at that and it starts to really hurt, and it plays on your neuroses. I mean, sure, I write books partly because I want to be liked. I want people to read what I say and think, oh, he's cool, he's nice, he's smart. Didn't he make me feel so good by writing that? And when I see someone go online and then other people agree, oh, he's a jerk, he's stupid, he writes bad, I could cry, I get really upset. And in the end, I'm sure it's important and it's powerful and it builds stronger character. I need to realize that not everyone's going to like my stuff. Some people are going to hate it, and that's okay. But the stuff that gets said online, it isn't just pure. It has an effect on who I am, on my emotions, on my neuroses, on my psychology, and it can be very, very hurtful.
But what makes the actual medium, like the medium computer, internet, so interesting for discussion? I mean, you could also have like a very strong discussion with somebody through a newspaper, through a column. Like, say everybody has a column a week, and you have an argument, and it goes on and on and on. What makes it more alive in the internet, or what makes it more interesting there?
Well, I mean, I'm lucky. I have a newspaper column, right? I have a weekly column. So I can post whatever I want in that weekly column, and even through the newspaper have arguments with other people who have weekly columns. But most of the people in the world don't have newspaper columns. There's not enough trees to go around. Well, right now in the U.S., I think 40% of homes have computers in them. It really will be cheap enough that everyone who has a telephone can have a computer. But the fact is, not everybody's interested in arguing about ideas. Not everybody's interested in forming communities online. Not everybody's interested in even speaking. I think people who want to get online in the United States anyway, they can. They can go to a library. They can get a free email account. They can get onto a bulletin board, go to a Usenet group, and it costs nothing. You can get through publicly now. So anyone who really wants to can. I think most of the people who are conversing online in this extended way, many of them are just frustrated writers. Many of them are people who would rather be doing it in newsprint, who would rather be doing it in magazines or more publicly or writing books. And
why do you think that? It's very interesting.
Because a lot of them are. Because of the amount of email I get from people asking me for an agent or to help them get published or how do you do it. It's many people, want their voice to be heard. And the internet is a good way to get your voice heard. But once you get a taste of that, of 20 or 30,000 people maybe hearing you, then you want more. Or you feel like your idea is right. And then you pick up a magazine and go, well, why should he have a right to say that in a magazine? The stuff I'm writing online is just as good as what he's doing. I should be in there.
So do you think actually...
I think the speed with which email has to be written and composed because of how many letters you might get and exchange, and the speed with which you have to go online, look at a bulletin board, and respond, tends to make people use a much more dense form of language. You know, it's not just shortcuts like these emoticons, smileys and sad faces and all that. When I look at email and postings written by 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, the thing that strikes me is how dense their language is, how in one sentence they might be able to communicate 4 or 5 ideas, and the subtle shading. Because the idea is, how do I respond, only have to type 3 sentences, but get out my idea, my attitude towards my own idea, my feeling about the person who just said his idea, and my feeling about his idea, all in 3 sentences. And it becomes very natural after a time. So people develop not just shorthanded ways of speaking, like in my humble opinion or for your information, not just little catchphrases, but denser linguistic structures. I don't necessarily see that translating into the way people speak. If anything, most of the young people on the internet who I see have developed new forms of language, new forms of written language, have not developed it verbally. They'll still talk like, you know, like it's like, you know, I was thinking like this. But when they write, it's all extremely not just dense, but complex and multidimensional.
How I experience it. I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, most 15-year-olds now are writing a lot better than I did when I was that age. A lot better.
So, you have already mentioned it. I've said it like it's always called the absence of physicalness while communicating. Is it actually that way, or what does this absence of physicalness lead to while communicating?
The absence of physicality online is positive in some ways because we don't become prejudiced against someone because they're black or a woman or young or old. You just see their words, you see their ideas. You don't have the normal cues to tell if a person's being honest or if they're lying or if they're very proud or if they're very naive and innocent or humble. You don't have all those cues. All you have is their words. So it becomes very pure in the sense that it's just ideas and articulation. That's all you can react to and respond to. That's also cyberspace's problem, is that it becomes a realm of pure idea, which might be great for an air sign Aquarian, but someone who's connected to the earth, someone who's connected to reality, someone for whom the way someone looks in their eyes communicates as much as what they've said, it's a very disorienting space and tends to be a space where people who can articulate their ideas and people who feel very strongly about ideas thrive. And people who don't live in that world of ideas don't do quite as well and don't find truth there. They just find words. You know, and for me, cyberspace was very interesting when I was at my most naive and most idealistic, because I was a young, torch-bearing kid saying, this stuff is beautiful, this is spiritual, we're going to evolve into a global brain, and all this great stuff's going to happen. And then as I turned 28, 29, 30, I got a bit more successful with my writing. I felt a bit more comfortable with my ideas, and I felt increasingly sad that I didn't have a life. I didn't have that many friends in real life. I didn't have, I wasn't getting laid. I wasn't, enjoying food and trees and stuff. And then I looked around the youth culture and I started to see the same signs. You know, why are all these kids going and getting themselves pierced all over the place? Why do we have Gothic culture and this romantic culture? It's the same thing that happened back in the 1800s. There was an industrial revolution. People felt very mechanized, working in industrial age jobs. And then we had the romantic poets drinking absinthe and wearing puffy shirts and walking through nature. And, you know, and they had that Gothic revival. Even piercing. It's because people want, they want to restore, they want to balance out this very Siberian, ethereal, intensely ideological way of living with something real, something core, something sexual, something tangible.
It's not so real. I mean, what you're saying is that there's an actual danger of, you know, getting lost in ideas to get, you know, to forget about like real, fucking real life or something like that.
No, you talk about, I mean, I don't think we got to talk about things in terms of dangers, you know, but
yes.
what I do think is, for me anyway, successfully contacting other human beings in an environment of ideas made me all the more anxious to contact people in a realm that wasn't just about ideas, in a realm that was physical, in a realm that was real, that was social, you know? Partly because maybe if you want to take my story very simply, I felt like a person who was unsuccessful in the realm of ideas and the realm of regular physical social culture. I went online and sort of became successful with ideas and then published books and then went in the media and got on TV. I became a successful idea person. And then after that, I started to think, well, if I can be a successful idea person, maybe I could be a successful real person too, you know, and go out and enjoy human beings. So for me, it was almost like some kind of a prolonged psychotherapy, you know, to build up my confidence, to share who I am with other people in the safety of online digital interaction, and then go out and do it for real.
So talking about realness, how important do you think is it to make up like a fake identity for the internet? How important is that? What do you think? Is that used very often, or do you think people are truly honest, or isn't it also a chance, you know, to invent your own character while being online, maybe changing it?
I don't think there's such a thing as a fake identity. I think some people go online, say a middle-aged man, and pretends he's a 14-year-old girl. That 14-year-old girl is part of him. That's part of who he is. You might have an FBI agent going online and pretending he's a child pornographer in order to lure in other ones and catch them. Well, part of that FBI agent is a child pornographer. He probably sees more child pornography than most good child pornographers. So the idea that someone goes out online with a false identity or a pseudonymous identity is true and untrue at the same time. What they're doing is exploring parts of themselves that they're scared to explore in real life. It's like a fantasy role-playing game where you say, okay, I'm going to play a stripper in this fantasy role-playing game, a stripper with magical powers who can fight. And that's because part of me wants to be a stripper with fantastic powers who can fight. And I like imagining that, and that's part of my own anima that needs to come out, my eros that wants to express itself, and that I want to explore that part of my nature. You know, it's easier to be a transvestite online than it is to do it in real life, because you don't have to buy women's clothes, and you don't have to be seen as that. You think you can hide it. But no, I don't believe in fake identity. I believe in the expression of a real one. It's like psychedelics. I mean, really, going out online, this is what all my first books were about. Going out online is very much like a psychedelic experience. You go out there, it's a hallucinatory reality. Almost anything you imagine, you can behold. You can be anyone you want to be. And it's non-linear in a way that most people haven't experienced before. It's a very open-ended space. And you start behaving and thinking and beholding parts of yourself that you may not have realized were there.
It's very interesting.
Loading.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, I remember, yeah. First off, I see the internet and media in general as a collective dream space. You know, there's this real life thing that we go about and do, and as individuals, we go to sleep and have dreams in bed when we're asleep. I think as a culture, as a collective, we have dreams in our art and dreams in our media. So I look at online interaction, certainly social online interaction, as a collective dream experience, which is why we're going to find examples of extreme sexuality there and examples of extreme violence there. You know, it's that the things that we repress in real life are going to show up in spaces where they're not controlled. So yeah, in real life we can, but we don't express our sexuality that regularly, and we don't express our violent urges, we don't express our fantasies, so we go do it when we're online, usually feeling more free about it than we do in real life. I mean, in terms of just raw sexual conversation online in the practical sense, well, yeah, I mean, you get any new tool, any new thing, and basically, if you're a guy anyway, the first thing you think of is, can I fuck with this thing? And the second thing you think of is, can I kill with this thing? You know, and that's, you know, and then if you can't do either one of those, then how can I make money off this thing instead? You know, and the internet sort of went through those stages where it started out, oh, sex, we're going to do cyber porn and we're going to all have sex. And then it's like, military is going to use this, and Gulf War and bomb and video games as war training. And now it's all just World Wide Web business, selling my product through this website. So it went through all three stages. I don't find the internet as sexy a place as it was when it was new. I mean, in advertisers and media people use the word sexy to describe something when it's kind of hot or edge or new. Is it sexy? And the internet was sexy, and it's not sexy now on its own. The internet is kind of over in a sense before it's begun. The internet's going to get to more people now, and more human beings will be able to converse, and more people will be able to buy things and order their pizza through their keyboard. But as a breakthrough for human consciousness, as a breakthrough for how we operate as human beings and communicating to one another on this planet, I think the idea of the internet has already happened.
It's becoming much more of a tool rather than, something very spread out, diverse or something like that. It's just more, the internet is more becoming a tool which you can use to actually do something rather than to experiment?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the internet began, it was very open-ended in terms of what is going to be done with this. And some people thought it would be just very simply that business people could send messages to each other. And other people, more like me, thought this is the way that humanity will find its consciousness, that this is the way we will evolve into the next dimension of reality. And everything in between. And I think what it's become, at least right now, the limitlessness of the internet has been a bit overshadowed by the huge amount of money that's been poured in by companies trying to figure out how to turn the internet into a direct marketing tool. As a way for people to buy plane tickets or buy flowers or buy books or send messages for money or stay in touch with their secretary and their job people and get paged. It's very practical applications. I don't think that means the internet can't be used for the wild and crazy dreams. If anything, perhaps all these big companies putting all this money into the internet just makes the bandwidth so much bigger that we'll be able to use it for the greatest, wildest, craziest things to begin with. But it used to be that when you said the word internet in a party of people, it meant the new horizon of human potential. Where are we going as a species? What are we doing? What is our relationship to technology? How will we grow? How will we evolve? And now when you say internet, it doesn't have that resonance. And it might be too strong to say that troubles me, but it disappoints me when something that used to be as almost powerful thing to say as God is now like saying telephone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I think that's also because you put a lot of hope into this, right? You personally were somebody who put so much hope into this word internet. Like you said, you thought it was God. That amazes me. I never felt like that. But so in which ways would you say is the net a democratic space, and in which ways is it elite?
The net's democratic for anyone who gets on.
But not everybody can get on.
Right. And that's the way it's not democratic. You know, the internet is democratic basically for anyone who gets on and isn't fooled into believing that their opinion is not as valuable as anybody else's. The internet is elitist when people are frightened from using it, when they look at magazines that try to make the internet look like a scary place that no one should be able to go on without understanding, when they look at the cover of Time magazine and think it's going to be about pornography and their children will masturbate themselves to death, or they look at Wired and they see, oh, this is all complex, this is for smart elite people, or they hear words like digerati and they think, oh, they're these special people online, or cyber gurus. I mean, whenever they call me a cyber guru, I really want to throw up. I mean, the word cyber guru is an oxymoron. That's the whole idea. There's no such thing as a cyber guru. Once something is cyber, there is no expert. There is no one who knows more than anybody else. You go out there and then you find out people who are designing whole websites are people who've only been out there for 2 or 3 months anyway. You know, there's not that much to learn. It's not that complex. It's easy stuff.
So why did they create such terms, you know, to make it more? Who's interested
People,
in making it more elite than by creating these kind of terms, for example?
People are interested in making it elite who want to make money off it, who want to maintain, you know, what Toffler called second wave economics. You know, that if you can fool people into believing that you're the only one who understands how something works, then you become the leader. You know, you become the one they have to pay to tell them how it works. So if you convince corporate America that the internet is so complex that no one should go and put their business on it without consulting you first, you're going to make a ton of money. Now, I'm out there telling everyone you don't need any experts at all. Just go out and play with it and you'll see. This is easy. This is easy. This is fun.
So you just said that the sexy and new and fresh and enthusiastic times of the internet are over for you personally. But in which ways do you think is it still a youth cultural or even pop cultural approach in the internet? How pop is the internet still?
Well, some of your most progressive and artistic viewers might be disappointed to know that popular culture is not quite as edgy, fringe, and progressive as we want to believe. You know, I like to think that if you put 14, 15, 16-year-old kids in charge of the media, you're going to have all this novel, new, brilliant, weird stuff. But the fact is, what you'll have is Spice Girls and New Kids on the Block and mixed in with some exciting, progressive, rave, electronic drum and bass things. You know, yeah, drum and bass is a huge phenomenon, but Spice Girls is a bigger phenomenon. And I really liked believing that the internet, because it was a popular medium, would promote the popular culture that I liked, the popular culture that I respected, which was this rave, electronica, psychedelic, progressive, almost extreme left-wing anarchist mindset. And at the beginning, the internet was about that because the early adopters, the people who were most anxious in playing in this psychedelic electronic space, were those kinds of people. The fact of the matter is, as the internet becomes popular cultures, as it becomes the true possession of youth culture, it's not just about these, frankly, elitist artistic expressions. It is about Pamela Anderson and about the Spice Girls and about football clubs and stuff that is of our culture. You know, the cultures move by tiny increments. You know, they don't move in these giant Renaissance events that only take a year or two. You know, they're slow but sure. So just because we give people the chance to talk about whatever they want doesn't mean they're going to talk about new things all of a sudden. They're going to talk about the old things for a while.
You're not talking about very radical, new and innovative, fresh music like electronic music, drum and bass, but when I read your books, for example, or when I read other articles, I was always amazed that there was such a great connection to music like Grateful Dead, for example, music that for me is particularly over and it has nothing fresh in it anymore. How come there's like always a connection between like the hippie music and new technology like the internet, for example? I didn't get
well, you're talking about two very distinct things here. First, the Grateful Dead, though they were in the 60s, were doing a new kind of music. The Grateful Dead actually did something very close to rave music. The Grateful Dead was much less about a very masculine guitar player on stage, you know, twiddling around in a phallic sense to be worshipped by fans. The Grateful Dead concert experience was very tribal. You know, it was a giant group activity. It was very much a consensual hallucination where people would come together, do a lot of LSD, and then trip out to this music that was very open-ended. The kinds of people that liked the Grateful Dead were the kinds of people who liked the internet because it was a hallucinatory, open-ended, psychedelic kind of a realm. The next kind of music that those sorts of people picked up was rave music, electronic music, which was also festival, tribal, open-ended. It wasn't songwriting per se. It was these weird open-ended psychedelic experiences, these group collective experiences like the internet. So in terms of the shape and texture of the experience, the Grateful Dead experience, the internet experience, and the rave experience are very similar. It's just that the people who were doing rave were too young to be involved at the very beginning of the internet. The technology was here, and the only people who were around at that point who understood how to play with it were deadhead psychedelic people, which is why it happened in San Francisco, which is why it grew up there. The other thing is there was a very direct connection between a lot of the people who got involved in the early computer culture and the Grateful Dead itself. I mean, Stuart Brand was a member of Ken Kesey's Merry Pranksters and a publicist for the Grateful Dead. John Barlow was a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, and these were some of the people who saw the early potential of computers to spread a certain kind of cultural philosophy to the masses. So the same people that were involved in the Whole Earth movement and the Grateful Dead movement and the prankster movement ended up becoming involved in the cyber movement. So these were the hippies. They were the very same people. So that's why there's that connection there too. It's just a direct lineage.
I understand. Okay. In Europe it's different because they're not so big there, and I was always wondering.
Yeah.
You have already mentioned that, and I always also think of the internet always being a space for a lot of mythological things that go on there and views. How do you think, how great is the actual creative and ideological freedom of expression online? Is it a myth, or is it really the truth that it's so free and open to everybody?
People online have a right and an outlet for absolutely free expression. Most of the people on the internet don't have the ability to exercise that expression because we live in such a culturally repressive environment, an environment where new ideas and where people's dream states are things to be embarrassed of and things to be ashamed of, that most people go online and still use the filters on their self-expression that they use normally. In some cases more. In some cases people feel, oh, I better not talk about this in email because I don't know who's going to read this. You know, as if email is any easier to bug than a telephone or than a conversation in real life. So, no, I think there's no limits to self-expression online. I think there's almost no censorship going on online. Someone can make a website about, and people do, about the weirdest, most magical, cryptic, occultist kinds of things. If you want to learn about the occult, go online, and you will see some pretty intense stuff. Rituals on how to, do things with blood and semen and pubic hair and bizarre things that are really hard to find in bookstores even. So there's a lot of free expression and a lot of exchange of mythic ideals. But I think the biggest obstacle to that is our own fear of limitless free self-expression. It's our fear of ourselves. We are afraid what we would do with our own power. We like living in a world where there's kings and leaders and popes and public relations people telling us how to live and how to think.
Okay. My last questions now. I want to talk to you about the other places where we will go to film, which are Feed, Pseudo, and Hardwired also. Could you say to each one of them, what your relationship is to them and how you feel about them? Maybe starting with Pseudo, because we're here now. What this means for you in the multimedia world.
Pseudo is an interesting group because it's, on the one hand, it's a real-time experiment in multimedia development as a culture. In other words, they're setting up something almost like MTV's Real World, where they're going to make multimedia and be multimedia. It's going to be a kind of almost a living multimedia commune. And what they're trying to do is experiment in social spaces with the kind of relationships that get formed online. So if people can relate in a certain way in this sort of weird, hyperdimensional, nonlinear, psychedelic way in an online space, can they do it in a real space? So part of that's what Pseudo is on the one hand. On the other hand, what Pseudo is the sort of genetic manipulation of television and cyberculture to see just how closely can these two things be merged. Rather than broadcasting television shows on the internet or broadcasting internet on television, how do the mediums mate if they can? How do they come together? And they're playing with that, and it's a fascinating thing to watch because they're doing it both technologically and conceptually, saying what kinds of things can we do? And sometimes there's people inventing new tools and saying, who wants to play with this tool? And sometimes it's people having a vision and asking others to make them a tool. So it's really, Pseudo is an experiment, and it's, I think, more valuable in terms of its own willingness to test boundaries than anything else.
And maybe you could say something about Feed. Also, maybe say something about what it means to publish journalistically on the internet compared to publishing in a newspaper or in a magazine. Is there a difference? That's maybe my second question. Maybe start with Feed.
I don't know a hell of a lot about Feed. Feed is one of the more successful online magazines. It's one of the few survivors. And there's a combination of reasons why that happens. One is they found the right alliances, people who will back them and continue to back them. And two, they managed to create conversational spaces rather than just broadcasting spaces, so that they formed something much more like a community of people than just a community of readership. And that's really the trick to doing it online. Personally, I tend not to publish online. I share things online, but when I do it for free. I tried writing for CNET for a little while, and it just seemed it seemed unreal to me on the one hand, and
Why?
maybe I'm just from a world where it feels like if your words aren't worth killing trees over, then they're not worth reading, you know? There's something about that, about the idea of sacrifice that goes into the actual creation of a book, that resources have been taken. There's something about the physical transmission of a book, that my object is being taken to someone's bed or into someone's bathroom, that I'm there, I'm present in a totemic sense in their home. And there's also the problem that cyberspace is a place where everyone, and everyone should, feels free to share their opinion. And sometimes you want to write something that's not an invitation to a conversation, but you want to write something that is what it is, period. And the printed word, for me, has a sense of closure about it, of completeness, that it can't be changed, it can't be added to, it can't be edited. It's out there. I've done it. That I don't get in the in an online interaction. I feel like, sure, my stuff can be questioned, whether it's a book or whether it's a magazine. That's fine. But when it's online, it feels like I can erase it and take it back. And people have that sense. And I tend to have a much more tentative tone when I'm writing online than when I'm writing in real life.
That's a good point. And what about Hotwired?
You know, I don't really know how. I really don't know.
But, you wrote me an email saying that you don't really think that Hotwired is such an innovative place anymore. And but I think it's a very influential place still, or it was. Or I mean, you must have some feeling or opinion about Hotwired as a site. As a place where people go to communicate or to get information from.
Well, Wired News and Hotwired, I think, are two different things. Then there's Wired Magazine.
I'm just talking about Hotwired. Yes. Yeah, sorry, continue.
I mean, my problem with Wired is what happens when an institution is considered an authority on something. I never mind it when a countercultural group or a little group that's fighting against the system criticizes those who they see as up on the stage and who need to be critiqued. When someone critiques Reagan or Clinton or Bush or the king, it's like, okay, the little guys can attack. When something is already accepted as an institution that has power, that is the institution, then I get upset when they declare what is wired and what is tired. It starts to look to me like they're establishing themselves as arbiters of reason, arbiters of opinion. And it's very tricky. It's very tricky. I mean, the tone in general of the Wired Online site seems to me to be a kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Isn't this guy shitty? Isn't this place stupid? Isn't that because we're better? And that's only cool when it's a true underdog doing it. When you've made it, it's almost like you've got to bend over backwards not to do that. You can have general honest critique, but to go wink, wink, we know what this is kind of tricky. The good thing about it, for me, is that all the critique I received in Hotwired over the last couple of years made me realize that I actually had arrived. I didn't take myself seriously. I always saw myself as just some guy up the street trying to write some books, trying to get someone to listen to him, and that everyone looked at and thought was just this squirt. And I realized if they were going to publish this many articles saying how evil I am, or bad I am, or stupid I am, or how much money I make, or whatever it is, I realized, people must be listening to me. Or if they weren't, now they are. So in the end, I realized, okay, I've got to start acting like the heavyweight that they are treating me like. I've got to start being a man,
That's what I just wanted to ask you. Do you feel yourself being treated as an institution, or do you think of yourself as an institution in cyber world? I mean, it's very difficult because you're saying that that's what you kind of reject. project in sites like Hotwire that, they've become very important and now.
Well, the weird thing is, some people are regarding me as some sort of institution in cyberculture, but only if there's a reason, it's because I was there for so long. The fact is, I am not a cyber person, and I'm not a cyber expert or even a computer expert. I'm a writer. So I wrote a book I wanted to write a book about psychedelic culture in the 1990s, and psychedelic culture turned out to be a very cyber culture. So I wrote this book, Siberia, not even realizing that the internet was going to be a part of it. And then I saw this internet stuff, so I have a chapter or two on the internet. I wasn't writing about that, but since it was the first book out on that, it became like, oh, this is the guy who was there, and we got to ask him to come talk about this cyber thing. But it was really much more like, I felt more I was emulating, Tom Wolfe, meeting the merry pranksters and writing about them, or finding a community of people and exposing what they do. And I think part of the reason why I'm disenchanted with cyberculture is because so many people have tried to make it my career. And because it's really hard to turn down money to write an article about it if they're going to pay me. Sure, I'll write it. But now I'm saying no, because I'm interested in other things. I'm interested, and I always have been, in people. And I think I got sidetracked. As an artist, as a writer, I got sidetracked by cyberculture and became really successful in that sidetrack. But it's not who I am.
So who are you? Last question.
I'm a writer, is what I am. I'm a person who looks at the world we live in and then...
an expert on media. You write about media. That's what you do. You write about people in media also, but it's all, you don't write about people living in the South Bronx, for example. You have your certain...
Take a look at my novel. Take a look at my novel and see if that's about media or not. It is, and it's not. There's more sex in that than there is media, but sex is a medium. Everything's a medium. What I'm interested in is the way people communicate, for sure, but communicate through everything. Because that's the real question is, who am I and what is this? That's the question. And one of the main ways we get feedback and response as to what our relationship is to everything else is through technology, is through mediums, is through language, is through culture. So yeah, if anything, I'm some kind of a social theorist. Looking at what is an individual and what is civilization, and is there a difference?
Okay.
Just a Harley, it's fine. Don't worry. Zugunisch. Kick auf der Schnee, kick auf der Schnee. You know what that means?
Lass uns doch zuletzt mal kurz
Look at the snow.